Hi, my name's Alfie Willingale and welcome to my 24 on Fishing with Naturals. What beautiful surroundings. Welcome to Orchid Lakes, a place that for some of you will need no introduction because this venue is steeped in history. I remember reading about this place as a child, dreaming of coming to fish it, so I feel very lucky to have 24 hours ahead of me to try and catch some of the carp that reside here. Known as home of the 30s for obvious reasons, I'm really hoping that one of them is going to see my landing mat. We're heading into winter now, the temperatures are starting to drop, so I'm armed with plenty of naturals, mussel blend, worm cell, and the ever faithful worms and maggot. Without further ado, I'm going to have a walk around and try and track down some of these orchid carp. This is the first time I've visited Orchid Lakes. I've read and watched a lot about it, especially when I was growing up. The home of the 30s, that name's always stuck in my head, so I felt very fortunate to be able to wet a line on this lake. Having never seen the place before, I was really excited to have a walk around. As we start heading into the winter months, location becomes even more important than it already is because those carp start to move about less. So if you get it wrong from the beginning, they're not going to be moving. There's less chance of them actually coming to your spot if you've got it wrong in the first place. So although I've only got 24 hours ahead of me, it's not a short session, but it's not a long session either. I've lapped the lake a couple of times to try and spot where these fish are. If I'm perfectly honest with you, they're not giving themselves away in one particular area. I've managed to see 2 or 3 carp, but by themselves, not in a big group, at opposite ends of the lake. So after looking at the water for a long time, I've decided to set up in the middle of the lake, so I'm never further than halfway away from the carp. It's a good area. I almost like it as the water starts to cool down, like your dinner at home. It cools around the edges first and the centre remains hotter for longer. Carp like being in the warm, that's where they feel most comfortable. So I'm going to bear that in mind. Haven't seen a great deal to go on, set up in the middle of the lake and get started there. But of course, I'm going to be keeping my eyes on the water and acting if I need to be. I've got 24 hours ahead of me. I'm going to start the timer now and then I can really start investigating the swim and getting on with things. So without further ado, 24 hours starts now. So we started the countdown and the first thing I did was work to investigate the swim. It became apparent there was actually more weed that I could physically see. It was a little bit weedier than I thought. A Canadian still coming in a nice rich green and the odd bit of blanket weed dotted about as well. But after a few casts, I was able to find a lovely silty area, get enough of a drop, which to tell me it was about 6-7 foot was my best guess. And I was really confident with that area that should the carp be there, I would get a bite. So when people mention fishing with naturals, what exactly does that mean? Well, outside of the world of fishing, it could mean anything that isn't processed, isn't sort of had any human interaction with it, things that naturally occur in the world, which could include things when it comes into fishing, like sweet corn and hemp. But generally, if you say naturals in carp fishing, you're talking about living baits, maggots, worms, things like that, or things that have lived. So I've only used one of our natural attractors on this session in my bait mix, and there's a few reasons for this. First of all, you don't need to be piling every single one of them in. They all serve the same job. They give it a different element, a different attraction complex. And you notice that I was using Scopex squid hemp as well, and that's actually got squid in it. So I've got the mussel blend, I've got Scopex squid hemp, and those two, the squid and the mussel blend, work together really well without having to use too much. So when would I think about using naturals? What's the right time to make the change away from your traditional methods such as boiling particle? Well, for me, the main reason that I can get away with using particle is when the silverfish become less active. Now, most lakes over the country are going to have a population of silverfish, and they are, if you're using maggots, for example, in the summer months, a lot of the time they're not even going to get anywhere near the bottom before they're all gobbled up, and they're not viable, really. You're not going to be having a baited area where you're going to be able to pull the carp down. So as soon as those temperatures drop, the silverfish slow down in activity, they move into the margins, move into the snags and the reeds, and you'll know because you'll be putting your hook baits out, tipping them with maggots, and they'll be coming back exactly as when you put them out. It's not going to be a sock of a maggot or a lifeless looking worm, anything like that that's been pecked. And that's really when you can start using them. So if you were to talk about a specific time of year, it's when the temperature has dropped enough usually, and that kicks in around December time, I'd say. Naturals are really easy to get into your bait mix. So whether you're spodding, whether you're using a baiting pole, whether you're throwing it in by hand, bait boat, whatever it is, it's no problem. It can be a little bit tricky when it comes to your hook bait though, because you have to think of ways to make sure that they're presented, they're going to stay on. There's a number of different ways you can attach maggots and worms, for example, but for me, I always like using a little wafter and then just tipping the wafter with 10, 12 maggots, and that works really well as a nice balance, and you still get that lovely kick away. And when that carp comes near that wriggling ball of maggots on the top, the wafter's there to act as a neutral buoyancy, so it flies up back into their mouth, yeah, and just keeps everything nice whilst making sure the rig is still effective. 3 hours into the session, that flew by, and I've just got 3 rods out there, fishing confidently. That's the main thing. I spent a little bit of time making sure I was really happy with the area. Really important to get that right, so you're sitting there for the long hours of darkness this time of year feeling confident, because yeah, otherwise it's just going to eat you alive. The sun is really quickly going now. I've got another half hour tops before it's pitch black, so I'm going to get the shelter up. Bait's all out there over the rods too, so yeah, time to get the shelter up and then go into the evening to keep my ears and eyes out. Moving into that evening, the darkness came in really quickly. The rods hadn't been out too long, if I'm perfectly honest. I wasn't sat back comfortable, bed chair bivvy up. Well before dark, I was sort of setting up into the darkness as well. But I made sure to keep my eyes and ears on the water. If I'm honest, the wind got up, it made it difficult to hear them, and I didn't see a thing. As the hours ticked on, the confidence was slowly fading away, and I was starting to think that maybe I'd got the location wrong. Well, this is always the worst way to be greeting the camera in the morning with no fish. Well, not entirely true. I had an unexpected bream in the early hours of the morning, and since then it's been very quiet indeed. We've only got 5 hours left. That has flown by, as it always does on these 24s. So I've had to have a change of approach. I've been for a walk this morning and found a few spots in the edge of all places where I think carp might have been visiting. I did go do a little bit of lamping with a head torch last night and did see one cruising quite close in, so I've gone just down the bank, baited up a few spots, and hopefully I'm going to check those in an hour or so, and I'll see some feeding activity. That's the plan. The time really is against me now though. I think if I don't have anything in the next half hour, I am going to move to a few swims down, because there's an overhanging willow tree where I might be able to quickly put a couple of rods underneath that, where I think the fish might be. So that's the plan for now. Keep my eyes on the water though. I need something to go on. I haven't seen anything really, concrete evidence of carp, so we'll see how it goes, and fingers crossed I can pull this out of the bag before the time's up. Oh, well, it was only half an hour ago that I last spoke to you. I said I've put some bait in another spot, reasonably close in. This time of year it's a little bit weird. So I said when I first started, don't get the location wrong from the beginning. I hold my hands up. I got it wrong. They didn't move into this middle part of the lake, but what I am going to do now is not get it wrong again. I'm going to go down there, fish for the last 5 hours, 4.5 hours that we've got left, and hopefully I'll have a fish to show you shortly. I'm rushing because it's always a lot of pressure against the clock, and there's a few fish down there, so we'll see how this goes. These were certainly fishing. Picked up a little bit of weed on the way in, but I'm a bit excited now to get round there. Yes, your eyes are always going to be the biggest tool for you. The problem is jumping carp are less frequent in the winter months. So in the summer, that's usually how you rock up, see where they're jumping. That's your best chance of setting up close to them. If your lake is clear, which this one is, that really, really helps, because you're able to physically spot the carp through the water without them jumping. So doing laps and finding where they are, and that's happened on this session. I haven't seen too many jumping. I've seen them cruising through, and it turns out that just the odd one cruising through led to a larger bunch where I've been fishing for the second half of my session. To run you through the bait mix that I've been using on this session, the theme of this bait mix is based around naturals, and the main reason for that is because of the levels of attraction that they offer, especially this time of year. But to run you through the exact ingredients that are within this, it's a bit of a buffet, but every ingredient serves its own purpose. To start off with, Scopex squid hemp. Now there's actually squid in this, so there's your natural bait coming into it as well. Nice and heavy, gets to the bottom, all cooked in the jar, so it keeps all the good content within it as well, and it makes it to the bottom along with the hemp. Classic carp bait, really, really good in a number of different situations. Moving on, then I add some mussel extract to it as well. Now this mussel extract is just raw blended mussels, exactly the same as what you find in the lake, and there are a lot of mussel shells in the margin here. It's just the blended inners of those, along with GLM, and we all know how much carp love GLM. It's a classic ingredient that, yeah, is so effective. That mix is quite sloppy by itself, so what I actually do is add Scopex squid flake, and the main reason for that is it's a binding agent. It's nice and dusty, a few little particles in there as well, and it helps bring it all together to make sure that when I do put it out, whether I'm spodding, whether I'm throwing it in the edge or dropping it by the baiting pole, it's getting to the bottom nice and quick, not suspending mid-water and buggering off down the other side of the lake. More naturals are then introduced at that point. Chopped worm, the amino acids from chopped worm, it is just an unbeatable bait if you ask me, and all those juices that come out are just going to give all the right signals to the carp to get them down and feed him. And then maggots in red and white and in caster form as well. What this adds is the fact that they're moving. Carp this time of year, when the weather does start to cool down, they're swimming about. They've seen it all before throughout the year, and the movement element of the maggots and the worms just gives it that another dimension. So when they are swimming over, it's almost like a pike. If you saw a fish moving or a damaged fish, if you've got those maggots and worms wriggling on the bottom, it's just another piece to your bait mix that can, on the right day, make all the difference. Well, you just see me drop that pole, left-hand rod, and a couple of liners on the right-hand rod. I've just sat down next to it just because they are tight to some willows, so I've got to be on the rods. 3-4 minutes. I don't know how to put it. Like, I keep going on about location. I said at the beginning of this piece, I went with my best guess. But the fact, if I hadn't got up this morning and come down to this spot, literally just a handful of the bait that you saw me using earlier in the piece, and they were on it within half hour, which tells me that I've been away from the fish, I've had the rig in the right position for 3 minutes, and I'm playing one. And it's a good feeling, I'll tell you that, when it pays off. Come on then. Yes, just about. Result, absolute result. I didn't blank. Get in now. There she is, a nice Orchid Lakes common, not one of the 30s that I saw under that tree earlier, but a very welcome carp nonetheless. 3 minutes in the right place was all that was needed. I've seen a few more fish in this swim as well, so I'm hoping with the 3 hours left, I can bag one more. Greedy's good, and I know that there's some bigger residents than this one in there, but I'm not complaining at all. A lovely carp and a brilliant one for this time of year. At this point, I had a new lease of life. I was really confident. I was thinking that there was another bite on the cards, and I was seeing a number of fish cruise in and out of this channel. We have just under an hour and 30 minutes left, which is a little bit frustrating, I'm not gonna lie, because I know there are really nice carp in here, big ones, 30 pounders, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't fancy one of those. Don't get me wrong, really like that little common, and it proved that making the move was certainly worthwhile, but what I saw feeding when I baited up those spots this morning makes me feel like I have missed out of one of those special ones. Time's against me. I'm gonna stay here. They've definitely pushed out. The numbers of fish that I saw swimming sort of through this channel, it's so clear the water has reduced. But I am seeing them show sort of just behind me round the corner. I've seen a couple show since the last time I spoke to you. So I think with the traps being absolutely perfectly positioned now, I've redone both of them to be in the areas where I know exactly it's clear. Handful of bait, I've been round there to bait up as well. It's down to the carp now, hour and 27 minutes. Will it happen? I'm really hoping so. Just to briefly touch on the rig that I've been using on this session, it's the rig I use for all of my bottom bait or wafter fishing, and that is a Slip D multi. The main reason I use this rig is because of how quickly you can change the hook and the hook bait. I cannot remember actually the last time I tied up a boom section. I have them pre-tied in my rig wallet, and all I have to do every time I go is yeah, just adjust whether I'm using a bait screw. Obviously I can't use a bait screw when I'm using maggots or using a hook ring swivel, and then I can have all the hook baits ready to go, and all I have to do is loop it off, slide the hook ring swivel off, slide another one on with a bait, and I'm fishing in so quickly, and that's really important for me throughout any time of the year because there's a number of situations where if you get it back out quickly, you would have got the bite, and if you waited 5 minutes longer, they're gone. So really good rig, absolute confidence in it. How I've set it up today, 50mm Scopex squid wafter, and all that's there for is to essentially create a slow sinking hook bait tipped with a big bunch of maggots. This time of year, obviously I'm using a lot of naturals in my mix, because they've seen a lot of boilie throughout the year. You know, they've had their sort of like feed up as you come into the back end of autumn and the early start of winter, and they've seen it all really. They've been through the whole year after spawning, and they can be a little bit tricky to catch. Generally the later part of autumn is all show and no go, and you can't really figure out exactly why you're not getting bites. And in this instance, maggots have been something that I'd say makes a big difference. Just tip that on a wafter really, that's all I do, and that flutters down through the water, that sits on the bottom, the hook lays flat, and then they sit wriggling away, and I think that just has that extra bit of attraction because the bait is actually moving, and it can be the difference between getting those carp to drop down if they're swimming over it and just swimming straight past it. So didn't work where I was originally, came down here and it works in 3 minutes, so yeah, it does the business. You just got to be on them, of course. So we have a number of different natural boosters in our range. I've touched on the muscle blend that I've used on this session. What makes it so good? Well, first of all, it is just raw muscle meat. So you know what a mussel is. Imagine that all blended up. They're cooked in the jar, so they keep all their minerals inside. And there's also an addition of GLM as well. And there's not a carp that swims that doesn't like GLM, a tried and tested classic. So you're getting extreme levels of attraction when you need it the most. We also have worm cell. Now worm cell couldn't be simpler. It's blended worms in a jar essentially. It's just all the goodness locked in that jar, saves you doing the dirty work yourself basically. We then have salted squid, which is already in the Scopex squid hemp, but if you wanted to use it by itself, it's again another one that's cooked in the jar, and the heat means that all the goodness is contained inside, but it's heavy. So all that squid, it's not going to be drifting away if it's windy. It gets down to the bottom where it needs to be, and again gives you a hell of a lot of traction where you want it. Then we have brine shrimp and gammarus, just to complete the range, and it just gives you another natural bait that you can choose from, chop and change to see what works on your venue. Just under 10 minutes left. I'm disappointed. After seeing what I did this morning, the number of fish under that willow, to get a bite within 3 minutes, to repeat the process without creating too much disturbance, and to not be stood here now with another carp in the bag when I know there's some real good ones in here. Yeah, it's a little bit hard to take. There is still 9 precious minutes left for us to see if we can bag one of those better ones, but you know, that's a problem with winter fishing sometimes. It is a little bit tricky. Yes, I would have loved to have not started where I did. I think if I was down here from the off, it might have been a different story. But yeah, lesson learned on that regard. Other than that, yeah, it's a little bit of a difficult one to take, but nonetheless, I did catch that lovely looking mid-double common, and I didn't blank, which is obviously a welcome fish nonetheless. We'll see this clock out now, praying there's one more fish in it. But other than that, it's been a challenging session, but we got there with 1 fish. Time is up. It's been a challenging 24 hours, I have to say. Really happy to have nicked that one. That was a right result, especially so quick after the move, which meant that was the right decision. I would have loved one more, but it's always one more. I would have had another one and then it would have been one more. So great result for this time of year. I didn't blank. Yeah, I'm gonna go away feeling a little bit disappointed, but at the same time, once I have a look at the photos of that lovely common, I think I'll be quite happy with the result. Back to the van. Well, I'm going to be completely transparent with you. The last time you saw me, the 24 hours was up and I finished with a mid-double common for my efforts. I was happy with that fish, but don't get me wrong, I felt there was more that could have been had, so I was left feeling a little bit disappointed. Anyway, the plan was to always fish that night outside of the 24, just for a little bit of personal fishing, and we had a few other bits to get, some photography and that. Me and Tone, I moved one swim up because what I'd seen, and I decided to go for it again. I re-topped the spot up, exactly the same mix, filled it with Scopex squid hemp, loads of mussel blend just to give it loads of attraction in that area. And what happened this morning has been unbelievable. I cannot fathom what is to my left here. Chris, the fishery manager, has kindly allowed us to retain these fish for filming purposes, but to my left, I have 5 carp, 4 30s, and most of those are upper 30s, and topped off by a 40-pound mirror as well. Unbelievable, I cannot believe it. So it shows you when you do get the location right, the rewards are there to be had, especially with all that attraction down in that mix. By no means am I claiming this within my 24, we just thought it would be too good to not show you basically. So it was a little bit too late for it to feature in the film, but we're going to add it on the end anyway. This could be one of the last 24 films that we show you guys. So I'm going to get these out now and show you some of my rewards from this morning's action. Oh, look at that, 40-pound, 14 ounces of Orchid Lake mirror. I would have been so happy to just have one of the 30s that reside in here, but to get one of the 40-pounders at this time of year looking like this, I am blown away. And the best thing about it is this is one of 5 that I have down there. The biggest, of course, but what a session. Those naturals working wonders this time of year. And so ends my extended stay at Orchid Lakes. A little bit longer than 24 hours, but a session of a lifetime. I cannot believe quite what's happened this session. A 40-pounder, 38, 37, this one just under 35, and one in the net I haven't even weighed yet, which is an upper 30. A low 20, and then that mid-double common that I did land on the 24. I don't think I can think of a session that beats that in the UK, if I'm perfectly honest. And I think it's going to take me a long while to get anything like this again. For this time of year, these colours, I'm going to cherish this session forever. What a trip.